Hello, my name is Edouard Thoumyre and I've been a headhunter for 12 years now. I have watched many videos and read many articles on how to write a great resume, but it seems they all miss many important points because they've not been created by professional recruiters. In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about how to create a great resume. And my 10-step guideline will work for both entry-level professionals as well as senior executives. Here are my 10 steps: the layout, the structure, how you should write your contact details, but also your objective, your summary of qualifications, your work experience, your education and your skills, but then also how to optimize your resume for database search, very important insider tip here. And finally, how to use some professional best practices so that the overall package looks good. Also, I will include a link for you to download this template for free at the end of the video and in the description below. Before we get started, it is very important for you to understand how resumes are read by busy decision makers. It only takes 5 seconds for your resume to be rejected. Whenever a decision maker, a recruiter, opens your resume, they already have in mind a specific opening and all of its corresponding requirements. They know what they want in terms of types of companies, types of industries, types of job titles or languages or territories you've covered, or maybe the countries where you've worked. And if they don't find all of that as easily and as quickly as possible, they might miss the entire big picture of your experience, and it's going to be your loss. I personally feel that too much graphic design is suspicious and hides a lack of content or lack of ability to actually structure and highlight your career and your experience. It is a distraction and doesn't look very professional. Now let's get started. Layout. You only have one chance to make a good first impression. It is a very important professional best practice to make sure that your structure is consistent and your design is consistent throughout the entire document. If you decide to jump 2 lines between each job, you should do that for each of those jobs and keep jumping 2 lines every time. Then also, if you use bullet points, which I think you should make sure that those bullet points are actually created properly with a proper bullet point feature in Word. By all means, do not try to align bullet points by hitting the space bar as many times as you think they should have and then adding a dash for the actual bullet. It will always show, and honestly, if you pretend at the bottom of your resume that you know how to use Word, then this is the proof that actually you don't. So don't do that. So now let's talk about the structure or the different sections in your resume. Obviously, it should start with your contact details. You should or could add an objective kind of summary at the very beginning, then your work experience, your education, your computer and language skills. Let's start with the easiest, contact details. Not much to say about it: name, first name, address, full or partial, it doesn't matter, but it's always good to say at least the city and state where you live. One thing that you should avoid is making the mistake of keeping your teenage years email address that has sexygirl@whatever.com or that has poeticlover@anotherwhatever.com. Why don't you create a professional email address that has your first name and last name @gmail.com or Yahoo, whatever. Another important thing here is that if you think the recruiter reading your resume will have a doubt on whether you're legally authorized to work in the country because most of your experience or all of your experience is abroad, or maybe your education is abroad, then this is the right place to show off that you are actually legally authorized to work in the country. You have a green card, a citizenship, whatever that is. You can keep it simple, such as, I'm legally authorized to work in the country. You should note that whenever I gave you again the different sections that you should have in your resume, I skipped summary of qualification. I really think that summary of qualification or summary or whatever you want to call it, or executive summary, I think this is a waste of space. Most of the time people try to summarize their resume, but the resume is already a summary of their career. So you're doing a summary of a summary and it's just repeating what we can read in your resume. often more quickly, because when we read your company names and titles, etc., we already have in mind the kind of person you are. So if you try to summarize this into another summary on top, it's wasted space. Use that space for something that really counts. And I think an objective type of paragraph is actually much more interesting, because this is basically the area where you can talk about what you want to do in the future. The rest of your resume is talking about what you've done in the past. But now is the only opportunity you have to explain where you want to go for this next job, or maybe the rest of your career. So save some space and keep it for what really counts. Remove summary and focus on objective. Work experience or professional experience doesn't matter, but this is the really, really big piece. And starting with your company names, your employer names. You should make sure that those employer names, as well as the rest, like job titles, locations, and dates, you should make sure that those are very clearly highlighted. This is the first thing that we look at. And it should literally take me 5 seconds to scroll through your resume and read very quickly company names and job titles and already have an idea of who you are and what you do and what you want, etc. A company name, especially if it's a very well-known one, tells me a lot about where you got your experience from. It tells me the kind of industry you've been working on. It tells me whether you've been working with big corporate America or in a much more entrepreneurial startup environment or smaller companies environment. It tells me if you're okay with internal politics that you can find in big companies. It tells me if you're the kind of person who's used to managing big budgets with a lot of support, or somebody who's actually able to roll up their sleeves and work with limited support from scratch in a much more entrepreneurial mindset. And same thing for job titles, especially when they're associated with a company name. We already have in mind for many companies and many jobs, when we see those two together, we already kind of know what we're talking about. So it's important that we can find them very quickly. Now, if your company is not very well known, it is very important that you can actually give a quick description of that company in 1, 2, or maybe 3 lines just below the company name, so that we can quickly get an idea of all the things that we assume from reading a well-known company name. You can add the type of industry, the product or services, how big the company is in terms of either sales, number of people, number of offices, everything that we can interpret when we look at a well-known company name. I see too many times people who have been, let's say, a sales executive for company ABC, and they are cold calling clients, visiting those clients, managing existing clients, and we don't know anything else. After reading the entire thing, we still don't know if they were selling toothbrushes or insurance policies or consulting services. No idea. Now, let me correct one thing. I believe that even if your employer names are very well known, I think it is really a good thing to summarize what those companies are doing, their industries, etc. It is always a very strong best practice that all of the best candidates have. And it looks good and professional to be able to summarize in just a few words and a few facts what a company is doing. Moving on to job titles. Same thing as for company names. I think job titles could benefit from having a 1 or 2 line introduction with some key facts. Key facts about the amount of business that you manage, the amount of people, the number of people you manage, or who you're reporting to, what is your territory. It helps figure out what makes your position special compared to another person in the same company with the same position. You can add a few more things, such as the challenges of the position, or maybe the objectives on which your bonuses will be based. Another job description. Stay away from writing a full paragraph text. You should use bullet points. You should make sure that those bullet points are also in the order of priority. If you're a sales manager, don't start your bullet point list by marketing tasks or administrative tasks. The one thing that we want to see is that you do sales. You're a sales manager, you do sales, and you're committed to sales. Whenever you start with something else, we feel that you're not very sales driven. Also, don't really list too many bullet points. 10, 12, or even less actually is a good number. If you have around 12 or 15 bullet points, you might do something that I've seen sometimes, and I think it makes really a lot of sense. You could split your bullet points between what are your actual responsibilities and what are your achievements. In achievements, what you can say is you can disclose some numbers, provided that they're not confidential. You can also explain how you overcome some important challenges, some big project that you've successfully managed, those type of things. And it helps really understand what makes, again, your job different from somebody who has the same title in the same company. Now, education. Education in general doesn't matter too much in my opinion. If you have a big Ivy League diploma, you may want to put your education first before your work experience, but honestly, this would only work if you're very junior, and most of the time, if you have at least 2-3 years of experience, those years should count more than your diploma. So most of the time, you should put your education below your work experience. Also, education is a section that we want to see exist. We don't really look at the details too much, but we want to make sure, in most cases, when we recruit for corporate companies, we want to see that you have a bachelor degree or a master's degree. Often those big companies require at least a bachelor. But as far as putting additional details is not always necessary. Overall, don't take too much space here. Computer and language skills. Depending on your experience, you may want to split those two in two sections. Computer skills on one side, or technical skills on one side, and language skills on the other. But most of the time, for usual business-oriented roles, you can have them two together. In the computer section or software section, the one thing that is the classic is Microsoft Excel. And everybody say they are actually proficient in Microsoft Excel. But we don't know if you're good or if you're not good, because everybody writes the same thing. So one thing I've noticed that really works very well is that whenever you're good and you want to stand out, you should add next to Microsoft Excel the type of functions and features that you know how to use, such as VLOOKUP, pivot tables, or even macros, or even if you're able to code in VBA, then you should probably add it here, because that will make you stand out as a good Microsoft Excel user. Then you can add all of the other softwares that you use, the big ERPs such as JD Edwards or SAP, QuickBooks if you're more into the accounting and bookkeeping. You'll know the softwares you have to add. Languages, you should stick to the languages that you can actually professionally use. Adding proficient, fluent, bilingual, all of that is not really relevant. We need to know the languages that you can use on a daily basis at work. The one big mistake you can do about languages is, instead of adding your languages down at the bottom of your resume where they're expected to be, if you hide those languages in the middle of a summary on top of your resume, we'll miss it. And I've seen that many, many times. Languages, they're always expected to be down at the bottom of your resume. You should put them there. I didn't really mention hobbies before because honestly, I don't really think they matter. Some people, usually more junior, add them, but honestly, everybody loves traveling, everybody loves going to the movies or photography. It doesn't really help. Unless you have something really, really outstanding to say, just save some space for something that really counts again. Now that we've covered all of the sections of your resume, you might think you're ready to create your great resume, but stick with me because there are a few insider tips that I think you need to know in order to optimize your resume for whenever a recruiter or a decision maker searches a database. Most of the employers, at least the most structured employers, use an ATS. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. It's basically a resume database that is able to receive your applications, but much more than this, it's also a system that is able to read your resume. Read meaning understand in your resume what is your name, what is your address, what are your employers and job titles and dates of employment and job description. And basically, as the database is able to read your resume, it fills up your candidate profile field by field. The technical word for this is called resume parsing. And that resume parsing actually has a level of accuracy that depends on many factors. If the accuracy of the parsing of your resume is close to 90 or 100%, then decision makers will be able to search properly their database and find you. But if your resume hasn't been able to be parsed properly, then you will not be found. You'll be invisible in those databases. So how can you maximize the parsing accuracy of your resume? First of all, the file format. PDF, they really look good and they're professional, but honestly, they don't work well with resume parsing. Don't ask me why, it's technical, but basically they don't work well. You should really stick to Word. The one thing you should really avoid is using an image PDF, because there are two types of PDF. You have the text PDF and you have the image PDF. Whenever you create a Word document and you save it as a PDF, it is a text PDF, and that kind of works. But if you actually create your resume based on a Photoshop thing and you save it as a PDF, it will create an image PDF that will not be readable by the ATS. Same thing if you scan an old paper copy of a resume, it will be an image and the ATS won't be able to read it. Also, to optimize the parsing accuracy of your resume, you should avoid having your contact details in the header or the footer of your resume. If you feel that the header and footer are actually too big, you can actually push it up or push it down to make more space, but it's better that you keep your contact details in the main content area of your Word document. One thing also that we've seen many times on resume templates is actually creating your resume within a Word table with columns and lines, and it helps you align everything and it's clean. And when you're done with your resume, then you actually remove the thickness of those lines so that the table is invisible. It looks good at the end on paper, but also resume parsers or ATS have a hard time parsing your resume with this, and they will mess up and mix up everything. Finally, you should consider SEO for your resume. SEO is what you may know as search engine optimization. And like websites try to show up high on Google for certain keywords, they need to include those keywords in their pages. Same thing goes for a resume. If you want to be found in a resume database, whether it's an ATS of a big corporation, whether it's a LinkedIn database or another job board resume database, if you want to be found for certain keywords, those keywords need to appear in your resume. I've seen many candidates, for example, coming from the consumer goods industry, entering the names of their employers, but never mentioning even once consumer goods or CPG or any kind of synonym. If you don't do that, whenever we do a search, we don't find you, because the types of keywords that we can use in a resume database, they're not that many. You have employer names, but you have industry descriptions. It's actually much quicker to search for consumer goods than listing all of the companies in consumer goods. But then you have job titles, you have territories, languages, etc. But basically you need to include those keywords in your resume. And if you're trying to make a career change, then maybe the keywords you want to be found for are not appearing on your resume. And that's another reason why you should use the objective paragraph on top of your resume, because this is where you could include all the keywords that are not appearing from your past. So if you want to say that you have transferable skills from that industry and you'd like to now work with those skills into another industry, this is where you can actually add those keywords. Finally, let's talk about some important professional best practices, and starting with the file name. Many people create their resume and name the file just resume.doc, and honestly it doesn't look very good. You should add, of course, the word resume, you should add your name, you could maybe add your job title and then maybe the date as well. This way, whenever a decision maker who doesn't have an ATS has your resume in their hard drive and scroll through a folder full of resume files, they will spot yours much quicker. You have nothing to lose there. And that's it. I've covered my 10 steps, and now I have a question for you. What do you think is the most difficult whenever you write your resume? And maybe you can actually give me your answers in the comments below. I hope this video was helpful, and if it actually was, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for watching.